My sister went on a business trip, so I took care of my niece for a few days. I made beef stew for dinner, but she just stared at it when I asked, "Why aren't you eating?" She whispered, "Am I allowed to eat today?" I smiled and said, "Of course you are." The moment she heard that, she burst into tears. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now let's dive into today's story. Tamsin Rowe had never planned to be a parent. She liked the simplicity of her life. The quiet apartment on Maple Street, just outside Boone. Her morning runs before sunrise. The way her coffee tasted better when she made it herself at 5:30 in the stillness. She liked her routines, her boundaries, her solitude. But when her older sister called at 9 on a Wednesday night, voice cracking with desperation, Tamsin found herself saying yes before she could think better of it. "It's just 4 days," Calla said through the phone, her words tumbling over each other. "I have this work trip, and my usual sitter fell through, and I don't have anyone else. Your family, Tam. Please." Tamsin pressed her fingers against her temple, staring at the half-finished book on her lap. She hadn't seen Calla in 6 months, hadn't seen Maisie in nearly a year. When? Tomorrow morning. Early. I know it's last minute, but… Fine. Bring her by 8. The relief in Calla's voice was palpable, almost embarrassing. "Thank you. Thank you so much. She won't be any trouble, I promise." Tamsin hung up without saying goodbye. She didn't believe in promises anymore, especially not from Calla. The next morning came cold and gray, the kind of November day that made the mountains look sharper, meaner. Tamsin stood at her kitchen window, watching the street, mug warming her hands. When Calla's silver sedan pulled up at 7:45, she felt something tighten in her chest. Not quite dread, but something close to it. Calla didn't knock. She pushed through the door like she owned the place, hauling a pink backpack that looked too heavy for a child. Maisie trailed behind her, small and silent, hands shoved deep into the pockets of a jacket that was too thin for the weather. "Thanks again," Calla said, already backing toward the door. She didn't take off her coat, didn't even unzip it. She's been fed. She knows to behave. Call me if there's a problem, but there won't be. Tamsin looked at her niece. The girl was 5 now, pale-skinned with dark hair pulled back, so tight it made her scalp shine. She didn't look at Tamsin, didn't look at anything. "Calla," Tamsin started, but her sister was already halfway out the door. 4 days. I'll be back Sunday afternoon." The door shut. The apartment fell quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Tamsin looked down at Maisie. "You hungry?" The girl shook her head. "You sure? It's almost 8. You must have eaten early." Maisie's shoulders lifted in the faintest shrug. She still hadn't made eye contact. Tamsin decided not to push. She showed Maisie where she'd sleep. The spare room with the old twin bed and the quilts their grandmother had made decades ago. Maisie set her backpack down carefully, like it might break, and sat on the edge of the bed with her hands folded in her lap. "You okay?" Tamsin asked from the doorway. A nod. Nothing more. The day passed slowly. Tamsin tried to work from home, answering emails while Maisie sat on the couch, perfectly still, watching a muted television screen. The child didn't ask for anything, didn't speak unless spoken to, didn't move unless necessary. By 5 o'clock, Tamsin couldn't take the silence anymore. "I'm making dinner," she announced. "Beef stew. You like that?" Maisie looked up, eyes wide and unreadable. "Okay." Tamsin pulled out the heavy pot, the one she'd inherited when their mother passed. She worked slowly, methodically, browning the meat, chopping carrots and potatoes, letting the onions soften until the whole apartment smelled warm and familiar. She remembered watching their mother make this same stew on winter nights, the kitchen steamy and crowded, Calla complaining about the smell of onions, while Tamsin set the table. That was before everything fell apart. before their father left and their mother started drinking, and Calla decided that being angry was easier than being sad. Tamsin shook off the memory and focused on the stew. She added thyme, salt, a splash of red wine. Let it simmer until the beef fell apart with a fork. When it was ready, she ladled 2 bowls and set them on the small kitchen table. Maisie came when called, moving silently across the hardwood floor. She climbed into the chair and sat with her hands at her lap, staring down at the bowl like it was something dangerous. "You don't like beef?" Tamsin asked, sitting across from her. Maisie didn't answer. She just stared. Tamsin picked up her spoon, tasted the stew. It was good, rich, savory, exactly how she remembered. "It's hot. Be careful." Still nothing. Tamsin set down her spoon. "Maisie, what's wrong?" The girl's hands trembled. She pulled them tighter against her stomach. Tamsin waited. The clock on the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping briefly across the window. Finally, Maisie leaned forward. Her voice came out barely louder than a breath. "Am I allowed to eat today?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Tamsin felt something cold slide down her spine. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried to keep her face neutral even though her heart was hammering. "Of course you are," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm, steady. She even smiled, though it felt like her face might crack. "Why would you ask that?" Maisie's face crumpled. Her shoulders shook. And then she was crying, not the soft tears of a disappointed child, but deep, gasping sobs that seemed to come from somewhere much older and darker. She pressed her hands against her face, trying to muffle the sound, but it kept coming, raw and broken. Tamsin sat frozen. Every instinct screamed at her to reach across the table, to hold the child, to say something comforting. But she knew better. She knew that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was let someone break without trying to fix them too quickly. So she sat there, hands flat on the table, watching her niece cry until the sobs turned to hiccups and the hiccups turned to shaky breathing. When Maisie finally looked up, her face was red and swollen. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be. I didn't mean to cry. It's okay." Maisie wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Tamsin pushed a napkin across the table. The girl took it, folded it carefully, set it beside her bowl. "Eat," Tamsin said gently. "Please." Maisie picked up her spoon with both hands and took a small, cautious bite. Then another. Then another. She ate slowly at first, then faster, like she'd forgotten how hungry she was. Tamsin ate too, though she could barely taste anything. Her mind was racing, connecting dots she'd been trying to ignore for years. No one asked that question once. No one asked if they were allowed to eat unless someone had taught them to ask it, unless someone had made them earn something as basic as food. After dinner, Tamsin washed the dishes while Maisie sat at the table, hands folded again, waiting for permission to leave. "You can watch TV if you want," Tamsin said, drying a plate. "Or we can read a book. Or you can just go to bed if you're tired. What do you want me to do?" Tamsin turned to look at her. "What do you want to do?" Maisie's face went blank, like the question didn't make sense. "Go brush your teeth," Tamsin said finally. "Then we'll read something before bed. How's that sound?" "Okay." That night, Tamsin lay awake in her own bed, staring at the ceiling. She could hear Maisie breathing in the next room, soft, steady, finally calm. But Tamsin couldn't stop thinking about that question. Am I allowed to eat today? She'd grown up in the same house as Calla. She knew what it looked like when parents used food as control, when love came with conditions, when children learned to shrink themselves to fit into spaces that were never meant for them. She'd sworn she'd never go back to that house, never speak to people who thought cruelty was the same as discipline. But Calla had. Calla had gone back and rebuilt it all, brick by brick, in her own home, with her own daughter, and Tamsin had let it happen because it was easier not to see. Not anymore. The next morning, Tamsin woke early and made pancakes. She set the table with butter, syrup, a glass of orange juice. When Maisie shuffled into the kitchen in her pajamas, eyes still puffy from crying, she stopped in the doorway. "What's wrong?" Tamsin asked. "Nothing." "Sit down. Eat." Maisie sat, but she didn't reach for the food. She looked at the plate, then at Tamsin, then back at the plate. "Go ahead," Tamsin said. "Can I?" Tamsin set down the spatula. She pulled out the chair across from Maisie and sat down, meeting the girl's eyes. "Yes, you can always eat here. You don't need to ask. Understand?" Maisie nodded, but the fear didn't leave her face. Tamsin watched her eat. Slow bites, careful chewing, like she was afraid the food might be taken away. After breakfast, Tamsin noticed other things. Maisie asked if she could open the refrigerator to get water, asked if she could finish her juice, asked if she was allowed to throw her napkin in the trash. Each time, Tamsin said yes. Each time, Maisie looked surprised. By lunchtime, Tamsin was exhausted. Not from taking care of the child. Maisie was almost eerily self-sufficient, but from the weight of realizing how deep this went. "Maisie," she said while they ate sandwiches at the table, "at home, do you have to ask before you eat?" The girl froze mid-bite. "You can tell me the truth. I won't be mad." Maisie set down her sandwich. She folded her hands, stared at the table. "Sometimes." "How often is sometimes?" "I don't know. Every day." A pause, then a small nod. "What happens if you don't ask?" Maisie's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I don't get to eat." Tamsin forced herself to stay calm, to keep her face neutral, to not let the rage building in her chest show on her face. "Who told you that rule?" "Mommy. And Evan. Evan. Mommy's boyfriend." Tamsin had never heard Calla mention a boyfriend, but that wasn't surprising. They barely spoke anymore. "Does Evan live with you and your mom?" Maisie shrugged. "Sometimes. He says I eat too much." Tamsin felt her hands curl into fists under the table. She forced them to relax. "You don't eat too much. You're 5. You're supposed to eat." "That's not how it works at home," Maisie said quietly, almost apologetically, like she was trying to explain something Tamsin didn't understand. "Well, that's not how it works here. Here, you eat when you're hungry. You don't ask. You don't wait for permission. Okay." Maisie nodded, but Tamsin could see the confusion in her eyes, the fear, the loyalty to a mother who didn't deserve it. Tamsin had seen that same look in the mirror 20 years ago. That night, after Maisie was asleep, Tamsin sat on her couch with her phone in her hand. She stared at Calla's name in her contacts for 10 minutes before finally pressing call. Calla answered on the third ring. "Hey, everything okay? Does Maisie ever skip meals?" Tamsin asked. No preamble, no small talk. A pause. Then Calla sighed, long, dramatic, annoyed. "She's picky. She refuses food for attention sometimes." "Why?" "She asked me if she was allowed to eat." Silence on the other end. "Calla, she asked permission to eat." "Kids exaggerate," Calla said finally. Her voice had gone cold. "She's dramatic. She's learned that if she acts pathetic, people give her whatever she wants. She's 5. And she's manipulative." Tamsin closed her eyes, pressed her free hand against her forehead. She asked if she was allowed to throw away a napkin. She apologizes constantly. She acts like she's waiting for permission to exist. "You've had her for 1 day, Tamsin. 1 day. Don't tell me how to raise my daughter." "I'm not." "Yes, you are. You're acting like I'm some kind of monster because I have boundaries. Because I don't let her run wild and eat whatever she wants whenever she wants it. Food isn't a reward, Calla. Don't lecture me. You don't have kids. You don't know what it's like." Tamsin felt the old familiar anger rising. The same anger she'd felt as a teenager when Calla defended their parents, when she made excuses for people who didn't deserve excuses. I was a kid once, in the same house you were in. Remember? Calla's laugh was bitter. That was different. Was it? I have to go. Calla. The line went dead. Tamsin sat in the dark, phone still pressed to her ear, listening to silence. She knew that conversation was over, and she knew what that meant. The responsibility wasn't going to be Calla's. It was going to be hers. Over the next 2 days, Tamsin watched Maisie with new eyes. She watched the way the girl moved through the apartment, quiet, careful, always making herself smaller. She watched her eat, noticed patterns that made her stomach turn. Maisie hid food in her napkin when she thought Tamsin wasn't looking. Small pieces at first, a corner of toast, a bite of apple. Tamsin found them later, wrapped carefully and tucked into the girl's jacket pocket. Why are you saving this? Tamsin asked gently, holding up the napkin. Maisie's face went red. In case. In case what? In case I don't get dinner. Tamsin knelt down to the girl's level. You'll always get dinner here. Every single night. I promise. But Maisie didn't stop. At lunch the next day, she ate so fast she nearly choked, shoveling food into her mouth like someone might take the plate away. When Tamsin told her to slow down, Maisie looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. Sorry, she whispered. Sorry. You didn't do anything wrong. Just breathe. The food's not going anywhere. But the apologies kept coming. Sorry for leaving a dish in the sink. Sorry for using the bathroom. Sorry for existing. Friday afternoon, Tamsin was on the phone with a work client when Maisie knocked over a cup of water. It was an accident. The girl had been reaching for a book and her elbow caught the edge of the cup. Water spilled across the coffee table, soaking a magazine. Tamsin raised her voice without thinking. Not at Maisie, at the client who was being unreasonable about a deadline. But Maisie didn't know that. The girl froze. Then she covered her head with both arms and dropped into a crouch, making herself as small as possible. Tamsin's voice died in her throat. Hold on, she said into the phone. She set it down and moved slowly toward Maisie, hands visible, movements gentle. Hey, Maisie, look at me. The girl didn't move. I'm not mad. I was talking to someone on the phone. I wasn't yelling at you. Slowly, Maisie lowered her arms. Her face was pale, eyes glassy with unshed tears. Come here, Tamsin said softly. Maisie stood and walked over on shaky legs. Tamsin wanted to hug her, to pull her close and promise that nothing bad would happen here. But she knew better than to touch someone who was still bracing for a hit. Instead, she handed Maisie a towel. Help me clean this up. They wiped up the water together in silence. But that night, Tamsin didn't sleep at all. She lay in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, remembering things she'd spent years trying to forget. Calla at 16, screaming at their mother to stop drinking. Their father, before he left, saying children needed to learn consequences. Herself at 12, hiding food in her bedroom because dinner was a privilege, not a right. The way Calla had defended them, made excuses, said they were just trying their best. And now Calla had become them. Maybe not in exactly the same way, maybe not with the same words. But the result was the same, a child who had learned to shrink, to hide, to ask permission for things that should have been guaranteed. Saturday morning, Calla returned early. Tamsin heard the car pull up at 10 and felt her stomach tighten. She'd been dreading this moment, not sure what she'd say, not sure how far she was willing to go. The door opened and Calla walked in, smiling, carrying a Starbucks cup. Behind her came a man Tamsin had never seen before, tall, lean, wearing a leather jacket and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Tam, Calla said brightly, too brightly. We finished early. Hope that's okay. Who's this? Tamsin asked. Evan Pike. My boyfriend. Evan, this is my sister Tamsin. Evan extended a hand. Tamsin shook it because it seemed rude not to, but his grip was too firm, too long. Like he was making a point. Heard a lot about you, he said. Funny. I've heard nothing about you. Calla laughed, but it sounded forced. We've been dating a few months. I wanted you two to meet. Where's Maisie? Evan asked, looking around. In her room, Tamsin said. Reading. She should come say hi. Tamsin didn't move. She's fine where she is. Evan smiled, but his eyes went cold. Calla, go get her. It wasn't a request. Calla went. Tamsin and Evan stood in the small living room, sizing each other up. He moved first, walking to the window, hands in his pockets. Nice place. Quiet. I like it that way. Bet you do. He turned to look at her. Calla says you're not close. Calla talks a lot. She says you judge her, that you think she's a bad mother. Tamsin felt her jaw tighten. I never said that. You didn't have to. Before Tamsin could respond, Calla came back with Maisie. The girl's face was carefully blank, but Tamsin saw the way her shoulders tensed when she saw Evan. There she is, Evan said, crouching down to Maisie's level. Did you miss us? Maisie nodded. Did you behave? Another nod. Good girl. He ruffled her hair, a little too rough. Let's have lunch before we go, Calla suggested. There's a diner down the street. Tamsin didn't want to go. Wanted to say no, to keep Maisie here where she was safe. But saying no meant making a scene, and she wasn't ready for that yet. So she said yes. They walked 3 blocks to the diner, one of those old-fashioned places with vinyl booths and laminated menus. They slid into a corner booth, Maisie squeezed between Calla and Evan. Tamsin across from them. The waitress came. They ordered. While they waited, Evan talked. About his job in sales. About the market. About himself. Calla nodded along, adding little comments here and there. But Tamsin noticed how often Evan interrupted her, corrected her, spoke over her. When the food came, Maisie stared at her plate, a grilled cheese and fries. She didn't reach for it. Tamsin watched her carefully. The girl's hands were in her lap again, folded tight. Eat, Calla said absently, cutting her own sandwich. Maisie picked up a fry, hesitated, put it back down. Evan noticed. Something wrong with your food, he asked. Maisie shook her head. Then eat. The girl picked up the fry again, bit off half. Tamsin watched Evan watching Maisie. His eyes were sharp, calculating. Maisie reached for a second fry. Careful, Evan said lightly, almost like a joke. We don't overeat. Maisie froze. She set down the fry and folded her hands back in her lap. Calla didn't look up, didn't say anything. Tamsin's grip tightened on her own fork. She's fine. Just looking out for her, Evan said with that same cold smile. Kids these days don't understand moderation. She's 5, old enough to learn good habits. Maisie sat perfectly still, staring at her plate. The grilled cheese was going cold. The fries were untouched now. Tamsin set down her fork, looked directly at Calla. Tell him she can eat. Calla finally looked up. Tamsin. Tell him. You're overreacting. Am I? Evan leaned back in the booth, arms crossed. This is a family matter. Exactly, Tamsin said. And I'm family. The table went quiet. Around them, the diner hummed with normal conversation, clinking dishes, the smell of coffee and grease. But at their booth, the air felt heavy, tense. Calla stood abruptly. I'll be right back. Bathroom. She walked away, leaving Tamsin alone with Evan and Maisie. Evan leaned forward, voice low. You should mind your business. This is my business. You've had her for, 3 days? I've been in Maisie's life for months. I know what she needs. You're teaching her to be afraid of food. I'm teaching her discipline. You're teaching her to hate herself. Evan's smile disappeared. You don't know what you're talking about. I know what happens when children are taught that love is conditional, that food is earned, that their needs don't matter. Wow, Evan said, leaning back. Calla was right. You are dramatic. Tamsin felt something snap inside her, something that had been holding back for years. She stood up, pulled out her wallet, dropped cash on the table. Maisie, come with me. The girl looked up, confused. Now. Maisie slid out of the booth. She didn't question it, just took Tamsin's hand and followed her out of the diner. Behind them, Evan called out, but Tamsin didn't stop. They walked back to the apartment in silence. Tamsin's heart was racing, her mind spinning with what she'd just done. Maisie didn't ask questions, just held her hand tighter. When they got inside, Tamsin locked the door and sat down on the couch. Maisie stood in the middle of the room, waiting. Are you hungry? Tamsin asked. Maisie nodded. Go make yourself a sandwich. Whatever you want. However much you want. The girl went to the kitchen. Tamsin heard the refrigerator open, heard the soft sounds of bread being unwrapped, cheese being peeled. 20 minutes later, Calla pounded on the door. Tamsin answered it. Calla's face was red, eyes bright with anger. Evan stood behind her, arms crossed. What the hell is wrong with you? Calla hissed. We need to talk, Tamsin said calmly. Alone. No. You don't get to take my daughter and then make demands. I'm not making demands. I'm asking you to have a conversation about your daughter's well-being. You walked out of a restaurant because I watched your boyfriend tell your 5-year-old not to eat. He didn't say that. He said she shouldn't overeat. She'd barely touched her food. You're twisting his words. I'm repeating what he said. Evan stepped forward. This is between Calla and her sister. Tamsin looked at him, really looked, saw the way he stood slightly in front of Calla, the way his jaw was set, the way he thought he belonged in this conversation. No, Tamsin said, this is about Maisie, and you don't get a say in this. I live with them. You're her mother's boyfriend. That doesn't give you the right to control what she eats. Calla's voice rose. You're not a parent. You don't understand how hard this is. Then explain it to me. Explain why your daughter asks permission to eat. Why she hides food. Why she flinches when someone raises their voice. She's fine. She's terrified. You're exaggerating. You've always been dramatic, always making everything into a crisis. Tamsin felt something cold settle in her chest. The same feeling she'd had years ago when she realized their mother would never change. When she'd packed her bags and left and never looked back. You're repeating something you swore you'd never do, Tamsin said quietly. The words landed like stones. Calla went pale. Don't you dare compare me to them. I'm not comparing you. I'm telling you what I see. You see what you want to see. You always have. You turned your back on this family because you couldn't handle that people make mistakes. I left because I couldn't watch you make excuses for people who hurt us. They didn't hurt us. They did their best. Their best involved making us earn food, making us feel like we didn't deserve basic care. And now you're doing the same thing to Maisie. Calla's hands were shaking. Tears ran down her face, but her voice stayed hard. You think I'm abusing my daughter? I think you're repeating patterns you don't even see. Get out, Calla whispered. What? I said get out. Take your self-righteous judgment and get out of my sight. Tamsin didn't move. Not without Maisie. She's my daughter, and she deserves better than this. Evan grabbed Calla's arm. Let's go. We don't need this. But Calla yanked away from him. She stepped closer to Tamsin, close enough that Tamsin could smell her perfume, could see the veins in her eyes from crying. You don't get to save her, Calla said. You don't get to swoop in and play hero. I'm her mother. Me. Then act like it. Calla's face twisted. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then she turned and walked away, Evan following. Tamsin stood in the doorway, watching them get in the car, watching them drive away. Then she closed the door, locked it, and went to find Maisie. The girl was sitting at the kitchen table, sandwich half eaten, eyes wide. "Am I going back?" she asked. Tamsin sat down across from her. She took a breath, made a choice. "Not tonight. Tonight you're staying here." "What about tomorrow?" "We'll figure it out. But I promise you, Maisie, you're safe here. Always." The girl nodded. But Tamsin could see the fear still there, just beneath the surface. It would take more than promises to fix what had been broken. But Tamsin had made her choice. Forgiveness was optional, but safety was not. Calla called 27 times that night. Tamsin didn't answer. She let the phone ring, let it go to voicemail, listened later to messages that started desperate and ended furious. "You can't just keep her. This is kidnapping. I'm calling the police. Please, please call me back." Tamsin deleted them all. She made breakfast the next morning like nothing was wrong. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. Maisie sat at the table, quieter than usual, picking at her food. "You're not eating," Tamsin observed. "I'm not hungry." "Try anyway." Maisie took a small bite, chewed slowly, set down her fork. "Is Mommy mad at me?" Tamsin pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. "Your mom isn't mad at you. She's mad at me." "Why?" "Because I made a decision without asking her first." "What decision?" Tamsin chose her words carefully. "I decided that you needed to stay somewhere safe for a little while. Somewhere where you don't have to ask permission to eat or to exist. And your mom doesn't agree with that decision." Maisie's eyes filled with tears. "I want to go home." "I know you do. Can I?" Tamsin felt her chest tighten. She wanted to say yes, to give the girl what she wanted, to make this easier. But making it easier wasn't the same as making it right. "Not yet," she said gently, "but I'm working on it." "Working on what?" "Making sure that when you go home, things are different." Maisie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Different how?" "Better. Safer." The girl looked down at her plate. "Mommy loves me." "I know she does." "Then why can't I go back?" "Because love isn't enough," Tamsin thought. "Because people can love you and still hurt you. Because Calla probably did love Maisie the same way their parents probably loved them. Imperfectly, conditionally, wrapped up in their own damage. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she said, because sometimes people need help before they can be the parent their child needs. And right now, your mom needs that help. Maisie pushed her plate away and put her head down on her arms. Her shoulders shook, but she made no sound. Tamsin sat with her, one hand resting lightly on the girl's back, until the crying stopped. The calls kept coming. Calla. Then relatives Tamsin hadn't spoken to in years. Her Aunt Linda, her cousin James, even her grandmother, who lived 3 states away and barely remembered Tamsin's name most days. They all said the same thing. Family handles things privately. You're overreacting. Calla's just overwhelmed. Give her a chance. Tamsin listened to each voicemail once, then deleted it. On Monday, a social worker called. Her name was Diane Pritchard, and her voice was professional but kind. "I received a report," she said, "about a child in your care." "From who?" "I can't disclose that, but I need to schedule a home visit. Are you available tomorrow afternoon?" Tamsin's hands went cold. "Yes. 2 o'clock. "Fine." After she hung up, Tamsin sat on the couch, staring at nothing. She'd known this was coming. Known that Calla wouldn't just let this go. But knowing didn't make it easier. That night, she explained to Maisie that someone would be visiting tomorrow to ask her some questions. "Am I in trouble?" Maisie asked. "No, absolutely not. She just wants to make sure you're okay." What do I tell her? The truth. Whatever you want to tell her. Maisie looked uncertain. What if I say something wrong? Tamsin knelt down to her level. There's no wrong answer. I promise. Just tell her how you feel. Diane Pritchard arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. She was younger than Tamsin expected, maybe 40, with short gray hair and glasses that kept sliding down her nose. She wore slacks and a cardigan and carried a worn leather bag. "Ms. Rowe," she said, extending her hand. "Tamsin, please come in." Diane sat on the couch, pulled out a notepad. "Thank you for meeting with me. I know these situations can be stressful. What exactly was reported?" "That you have your niece staying with you without your sister's consent. Is that accurate?" Tamsin sat across from her. "That's accurate." "Can you tell me why?" Tamsin explained. She laid out everything. The question about eating, the hidden food, the flinching, the boyfriend, the restaurant. She kept her voice calm, factual, even though her heart was racing. Diane took notes, asked follow-up questions, showed no emotion. "And where is Maisie now?" she asked finally. "In her room. Do you want to talk to her?" "I do. Alone, if that's all right." Tamsin nodded and called for Maisie. The girl came out slowly, eyes wide. "Maisie, this is Ms. Pritchard. She wants to ask you some questions. Is that okay?" Maisie nodded. Tamsin went to her room and closed the door. She sat on her bed, hands clenched together, listening to the murmur of voices from the living room. She couldn't make out words, but she could hear the gentle tone of Diane's questions, the soft responses. 20 minutes later, Diane knocked. "We're done," she said. Tamsin came out. Maisie was back at the kitchen table, drawing. Diane closed her notebook. "Thank you for your time. I'll be in touch within the next few days." "What happens now?" "I'll review my notes. Talk to your sister. Make a recommendation." "What kind of recommendation?" "That depends on what I find." Diane left. Tamsin locked the door behind her and leaned against it, closing her eyes. "Did I say the right things?" Maisie asked from the table. "You did perfectly." 3 days later, Diane called again. "I've completed my initial assessment," she said. "I'm recommending that Maisie remain in your care temporarily while we work with your sister on a safety plan." Tamsin felt something loosen in her chest. "Temporarily?" "Yes. This isn't permanent placement. Your sister has agreed to attend counseling and parenting classes. If she completes them successfully, we'll revisit custody. And the boyfriend? He's no longer living with your sister. She's ended the relationship." Tamsin closed her eyes. "Is she okay?" "She's angry, but she's cooperating. For now." "Can I talk to her?" "I'd recommend giving her some space. She's processing a lot." After they hung up, Tamsin told Maisie the news. "So I'm staying here?" the girl asked. "For a while. Is that okay?" Maisie nodded slowly. "What about Mommy?" "She's getting help, so she can be a better mom." "Does she hate me?" "No, sweetheart. She's just scared and confused. But she doesn't hate you." Maisie climbed onto the couch and curled up against Tamsin's side. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact. Tamsin wrapped an arm around her and held on. The family split just like Tamsin knew they would. Aunt Linda stopped returning calls. Cousin James sent a curt text. "You should have stayed out of it." Her grandmother called once, voice weak and confused, asking why families couldn't just forgive each other. But a few people surprised her. Her Uncle Mark, who she hadn't spoken to in a decade, sent a message. "You did the right thing." A childhood friend from Boone, who'd heard through the grapevine. "I'm proud of you." And, unexpectedly, a letter from Calla. It arrived on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after Diane's visit. Plain, white envelope, Calla's handwriting on the front. Tamsin opened it carefully. "Tam, I'm not ready to talk to you. I don't know if I ever will be. But the social worker said I should write this, so here it is. You were right. About some things. Not everything. But enough. I didn't see what I was doing until you forced me to see it. And I hate you for that. I hate that you were right. I hate that you got to be the hero while I look like the villain. I hate that my daughter is safer with you than with me. But I'm trying. I'm going to counseling. I'm learning things I should have learned years ago. And maybe, eventually I'll be able to thank you for this. But not now. Take care of her. See. Tamsin read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. She didn't write back. Months passed. Maisie started kindergarten at the elementary school, 3 blocks from Tamsin's apartment. She made friends slowly, carefully, like someone learning a new language. She stopped hiding food in her pockets, stopped eating like someone might take her plate away, stopped apologizing for existing. She still had hard days. Days when she'd ask if she was allowed to do something, and Tamsin would gently remind her that she didn't need permission. Days when she'd cry for her mother, and Tamsin would hold her and wish she could fix everything faster. But there were good days, too. Days when Maisie laughed without holding back. Days when she drew pictures and taped them to the refrigerator. Days when she ran home from school, excited to tell Tamsin about something that happened. One night in early March, Tamsin made beef stew again. The same recipe, the same slow simmer, the same smells filling the apartment. When it was ready, she called Maisie to dinner. The girl climbed into her chair, no hesitation, no fear. She picked up her spoon and took a bite. Good, Tamsin asked. Really good. They ate together in comfortable silence. Outside, rain tapped against the windows. Inside, the apartment was warm and safe. Halfway through the meal, Maisie looked up. Aunt Tam. Yeah. Thank you. For what? For letting me stay. Tamsin set down her spoon. You don't have to thank me. I want to. Tamsin felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. You're welcome, and you can stay as long as you need. Even if Mommy gets better? Even then, there's always a place for you here. Maisie nodded and went back to eating. Not fast, not slow. Just normal, like a child who knew she was safe. Tamsin watched her, heart heavy but steady. She thought about Kala, somewhere across town, trying to put herself back together. She thought about their mother, long dead, who never learned how to love without conditions. She thought about all the ways families broke and all the ways they sometimes, rarely, found ways to heal. But mostly she thought about the choice she'd made. The choice to step in, to disrupt, to break apart something that looked like family but felt like slow poison. People had told her she was wrong, that she should have stayed out of it, that families were supposed to work things out privately. But privacy had protected too many people who hurt children. Forgiveness had excused too many patterns that should have been broken. Tamsin had learned long ago that sometimes love meant saying no, that sometimes protection meant disruption, that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was refuse to let someone continue down a path that would destroy them. Family didn't always protect you, but sometimes if you were lucky, one person was enough. And Tamsin had decided, once and forever, that forgiveness was optional, but safety was not.